Hello, beloved, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Doña, aka Doña the Light, and today I'm going to be talking about gentle parenting. Yes. As always, if you find anything here on my channel enjoyable, anything like that, leave me a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, or subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos when I post them. I'll be posting new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. A little background about myself when it comes to gentle parenting. I have 3 children, an 8-year-old, soon to be 9, a 5-year-old, soon to be 6, and a newborn who's just a couple weeks old, who's in my lap. And I've been gentle parenting for as long as I can remember. I was not gentle parented as a child. It's not something that I've actually ever seen anyone do before. But when it came to my children, it became very evident that I wanted them to be able to communicate and share what they felt and share their thoughts. And I've always placed a lot of value on, well, not always, I've grown to place value on them as people, as individuals. And I feel like that's the biggest disconnect when it comes to gentle parenting versus non-gentle parenting. The 4 main components of gentle parenting are empathy, understanding, respect, and boundaries. When it comes to empathy, and you can of course look up the dictionary definition, but to me, empathy is really about being able to connect with your child and think about why they could be upset about something, instead of just belittling whatever it is that they're feeling and saying that they're being disrespectful or ungrateful or anything else that we'd like to label it. For example, if your child is having a really difficult time going from playing a game to getting ready for bed, it could be that they just have a tough time switching tasks. Now, we can't expect for our children to be able to just do that at the drop of a dime, because we know there are certain things that we have a difficult time switching tasks from, right? Sometimes it's when we're going from work mode to home, or when we're going from something we really enjoy to something we don't enjoy, right? If we're going from playing or something like that and we have to switch gears and, get the kids ready for bed or something like that, that might be a difficult transition for us to make. So having empathy is really connecting with our child as best we can, understanding that we're going to make mistakes, but meeting them where they are and maybe just giving them a couple extra minutes to transition. Maybe we're setting a timer, maybe we're et cetera, in order to help them transition. For my son, what works for him is giving him times and saying, hey, at this time, we're going to do this. That helps him transition from one task to another a lot quicker. And of course, he moves a lot slower than I do because he's 5 years old. And that by itself is taking some time for me to understand, especially having a newborn in the house. But, yeah, just connecting and speaking to and interacting with your children with empathy. When it comes to boundaries, this is, I think, where people believe or have this misconception that gentle parenting is really about just having your kids walk all over you, and it's not at all. Because we don't spank our kids because we don't spank our children, because we don't yell at our children, it has nothing to do with, it's so far from our children walking all over us. For example, if my son does something, there are still consequences to his behavior. If he drops his tablet, for example, the consequence is either that it's broken or that he doesn't get to play with it for a little while or whatever. So when it comes to boundaries for your children, just like you have with, hopefully, you have with the adults and other people in your life, there's a boundary that you enforce or that you inform them of. You enforce it by reminding them of the boundary. And then, of course, there's a consequence if and when they violate that boundary. The boundary could be every day at 8:45, we're in our rooms getting ready for bed. If that boundary is crossed or if that boundary is not honored, you get to decide what the consequence is. Perhaps instead of, watching a few TV shows before bed, maybe that privilege is gone and you have to just kind of hang out until 9 o'clock when it's time for bed. The biggest thing, of course, is to remember that the boundary has, or the consequence to the boundary has to be enforced the first time, just like any other boundary with any other individual in your life. If your child crosses a boundary and you feel, oh, I should give them another chance, you're going to have an issue, because now your child knows that you're not going to uphold that boundary the first time. You may not even do it the second time. And they'll be able to maybe beg with you or plead with you and say, oh, mommy, it was an accident. Oh, mommy, I just forgot. When in reality, those things do happen. But just because it was an accident or they forgot doesn't mean that there isn't still consequences to their actions. Now, you get to decide maybe if you'd like to change things up and say, okay, maybe this consequence will be for a week. And then after the week, we'll try again. And if it happens again, then, it's no TV before bedtime forever. I'm trying to think of another boundary that I have for my son or even my daughter. For both of them, pretty much one of the boundaries that we have is, especially on the weekends, because during the weekdays, they don't really get it as much because they're in school most of the day. But we take breaks from our electronics. My daughter uses a phone to play games and stuff like that. My son uses a tablet. And during the weekends, we take breaks. So, every once in a while, I'll say, okay, let's take a tablet and a phone break. And because I'm very consistent with it, and I'll do my best to practice it with them, as far as putting my phone away, there's not typically any, pushback, I guess you could say. And most of it is just because the age of our children, and also because we're very consistent with it. It's never done out of frustration. It's never done out of us being upset with them. It's never done as a consequence to any behavior. It's usually just done as, they've spent this amount of time on the electronics. They're seeming kind of zoned out. It's time to switch to do something else. Maybe we'll go outside. Maybe we'll play some games together, like a board game or something like that. But often it's just, let's switch gears and do something else. But again, when it comes to boundaries, the biggest thing, just like I've spoken about when it comes to adults and other people, is the consequence has to be enforced. When it comes to gentle parenting and understanding, for me, the understanding portion really comes to understanding where your children are developmentally based on their age. My son is 5 years old. There are things that I know that he just cannot do yet. He hasn't been on this earth long enough. But often we as adults project these expectations, these very unrealistic expectations, onto our children at a very young age. And we expect them to be able to do things because they speak clearly, right? We usually use them speaking clearly or them understanding certain things, as far as if we ask them a certain question and they answer correctly, we use that as a way to gauge and say, oh, well, they should be able to do this, or they should be able to do that, when in reality, they can't. Like, for example, I know that when my son gets in trouble, right, if there is a consequence to a boundary that he crossed, he will, do whatever he's told, but he always, always, always gets upset. When he gets in trouble, he gets upset. If I'm holding him accountable for things that I've told him not to do, he gets upset and he cries. So I'll give him that time to just be upset and cry. I don't tell him to stop crying. I don't tell him to get it together. I don't tell him boys don't cry. I just give him the space to be upset and cry. And, I'm there wherever I am. And he comes to me when he's done. He'll talk to me about it and say, hey, I just cried. And we'll talk about it if we need to talk about it. And that's the end of it. But that's something that he's been doing for a while. And I'm assuming it's something that he will grow out of. But if he doesn't, it's okay. Or if it takes him a couple years, it's okay. It's okay for him to be upset when, he's held accountable for his behaviors. That's okay. I'm not going to demean him or scold him for having emotions or for displaying emotions, right? Because I understand that at his age, developmentally, that's where he is, right? When it comes to my daughter, I understand that certain things, especially when it comes to school and also when it comes to being held accountable for her actions, make her anxious. Or like doing her hair, for example. Oh my goodness. She really does not like getting her hair combed. So there are times when I've washed her hair, actually just this past weekend, washing her hair, and there's parts of her hair that are, very, very curly, and they get knotted really easily. And so when I comb those parts, I can see her wincing, and she's like bracing herself for the worst. And, just as I'm combing her hair with the largest comb in the world with conditioner, she's like just so tight, and like, you can see that she's waiting for something to happen. Like she's anticipating that something is going to hurt. So I stop and I ask her, does any of this hurt? She says no. And I said, okay, well, tell me what part does hurt so I can ensure not to do that. I told her, you've told me that, this hurts when I comb directly on her scalp. So I'm combing through your hair. I know that these parts hurt because her hair is curly. They get knotted really easily. I said, but I've already combed to those parts and it's not knotted anymore. So instead of getting upset and saying, and again, she articulates really, really well. She speaks really well. Instead of getting upset and saying, there's no reason you should be crying. I know this doesn't hurt. I just have that conversation with her. And it takes me a minute and a half, 2 minutes to have a conversation with her about this and ask her about what she's feeling. And then we can proceed with what we're doing. And now neither one of us are upset. Whereas if I were to just force and just keep going through and just tell her to stop crying or give her a reason to cry, like I've heard before, we wouldn't get anywhere. Now we're both, in sour moods. Now she's having a bad experience with me doing her hair because she's anxious. She's anticipating some pain. And now she believes that she's in trouble for experiencing pain or anticipating pain, when in reality, she shouldn't be, right? So take the time, if you haven't already, to do a little research, watch some videos, read some books about what each age is going to typically bring about for your child developmentally. Every child is going to be a little different. They may be right on kilter. They may be a little high, maybe a little low, whatever it is. But just use those as a gauge to take into account, what your child may be experiencing or what they're actually capable of doing when it comes to their mental capacity, when it comes to their level of understanding and things like that. Okay, so we mentioned empathy, boundaries, understanding, respect. When it comes to respect, this, along with understanding, has been really difficult for me to grasp and fully understand, especially, growing up in a Black household where children are seen and not heard, and they're not really valued or respected as children. They're valued and respected once they get older and have jobs and can contribute. But the reality is children can contribute as soon as they're born, right? Well, maybe not as soon as they're born. He's a little bit of a potato. But children can contribute a lot earlier than we give them credit for. And we have to understand that we should respect our children because we want them to seek respect from other people. And we also want them to respect other people. So instead of them believing that they can speak to, maybe they completely understand that they can't speak to adults, that they can't insult adults, right? Because they understand that the adults in their life, they can't insult the adults in their life, whether it be parents, teachers, aunts, uncles, etc. But because of the way that we speak to our children, they may very well speak to other children that way. And they may definitely believe that they can continue to do so, and they can insult, and they can be mean to, and they can belittle, and they can demean other children because they are belittled and demeaned and etc. I mean, what honestly would teach them anything otherwise? Remember that, and this is something that's been said forever and ever and ever. I'm sure there's even scientific studies on it. Our children are always going to absorb and respond to the way that we behave and the way that we speak to them, instead of the things that we tell them to do and the things that we tell them not to do, because actions always speak louder than words. So if you as a child are always seeing the most prominent adults in your life, whether it be your parents, aunts, uncles, etc., speak to children in a way that shows, they don't respect the children. They don't believe that the children have any value. They don't believe that the children can contribute in any way. What will prevent your child from speaking and interacting with other children the same way? Nothing, right? And I'm sure that if your child goes to public school or goes to school period where they have other children in the classroom, your child's teacher is probably trying so hard to reverse this, but they can't do it on their own. So all of the things that go into gentle parenting, I feel, are so difficult for us as adults, especially as Black adults, because these are things that we did not observe growing up. And we have to basically rewire ourselves and remind ourselves that if we ask our child something and they respond, it's not talking back and it's not disrespectful. They're responding. It's just that simple. But when we were children, anytime we said anything, we were talking back and we were being disrespectful, right? Whew. Anywho, long story short, when it comes to gentle parenting, the 4 things that are the primary focus, or the pillars of gentle parenting, are empathy, respect, understanding, and boundaries. Give yourself the time to practice this. Give yourself the time to practice this as often as you need to. Have conversations with other parents, have conversations with your child's teacher, and just give yourself the time to practice. Understand that it is going to be a process. You're not going to do it perfectly. It very well might be very difficult in the beginning, and that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. Just like your child is learning how to communicate properly and how to, how to do all kinds of things properly. You're now learning this new skill because you'd like for your children to grow up being happy, knowing how to enforce boundaries and knowing how to communicate when they like and don't like something. If this is the type of child that you'd like to raise, then I would definitely encourage you to look into and learn more about gentle parenting. Just take your time. It's okay if it's difficult. It's okay if you're not perfect in the beginning. It's okay if you're never perfect at it. It's totally fine. But you doing your best is all your child can ever ask for. And I guarantee that even though our parents made mistakes, we appreciated it that they did their best when they raised us, right? All right, beloved, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. As always, like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my videos. And I'll be back next Tuesday with another video. I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and I'll see you then. Bye.